Hey guys, it's Kukatu, and today I want to share some simple pixel art animation tips for those just getting started. I'm going to describe some animation principles that I apply to my own work, and the first of which I want to talk about is drag. Here I have this simple run cycle with this wizard character, and it looks okay, but overall the animation feels kind of rigid, stiff. We can alleviate some of this clunkiness by applying some drag, so we can identify the regions of the character that are a little more loosely associated. Things like the top part of this hat, the staff that is in the wizard's hand, or even the trailing edge of this cloak here. What we can do is we can identify these regions and then delay their offset by a couple of frames. We can identify when the wizard is going down on this step. It's on frame 4. What we can do is rather than the hat moving down with the rest of the character, we can have it stay up in the air for at least an extra frame. So I'm going to move this up here, and I'm going to make corrections as I go. And we can do the same thing on the way up. So the character moves up on frame 6. We're going to take the top part of the hat and move it back down. And I'm going to just smoothen out the hat with this pixel here. And you can see now at this point, the offset timing between the hat and the rest of the body is enough to make this run cycle a lot more dynamic and more visually interesting. And we can apply the same principle to the trailing edge of the cloak and the staff in the wizard's hand. You don't want to choose too many things to offset, otherwise the animation can look visually noisy. But if you can pick out 1 to 2 or even 3 things to delay the offset of, it can make the animation look a lot more dynamic as a whole. Now the second animation principle I'd like to talk about today are smear frames. Here I have this pumpkin sword animation where he swings his sword and quickly picks it back up over his shoulder. I want the slash of the sword to be really fast, but with so little frames, the motion between this position and this position is kind of lost. And with this being the primary action of the animation, I really want to visually emphasize this. And we can do this with a smear frame. Normally when we look at this, we can kind of imagine that the sword travels from this position to this position in a linear motion, but I would really like to emphasize that it's coming down at an arc. And this is also what a smear frame is great for. So on this frame of impact, I'm going to draw this kind of arcing motion, the one that I want to represent, and I can just blend it in with the existing frame. So I'm going to color this in here, and I'm going to clean it up. I think the smear frame's pretty okay. And as you can see, the smear frame allows us to see that the sword is swung in an arc as opposed to just straight to the end position. The smear frame helps with the visual clarity and also the visual impact of the swing. And as you can see here, I've also applied the principle of drag to the stem on top of the pumpkin's head. As the pumpkin readies to swing his sword downward, the stem lags behind, and then momentum carries it a little bit forward as he's moving backwards. It kind of shifts back to its original position as he stands up. As he chambers the sword, his head lowers, and his face and his stem rise a little bit before resettling into his default idle position. And overall, it makes for a more dynamic, more visually interesting animation. The next animation principle I want to talk about is anticipation. Here I have this wizard character casting a spell, and again, it looks okay, but this simple up and down motion is a little bit bland. We can use anticipation to make it look much more dynamic. Anticipation is when a character prepares themselves for the movement they are about to do, usually by moving in the opposite direction. Anticipation can look like a character coiling their arm back before throwing a punch or crouching down before a jump. And we're going to do something pretty similar here with our wizard character. On this first frame, I'm going to have the wizard character bend to their knees and lower their torso a little bit. I'm going to do the same thing on the next frame. And already this makes for a more interesting animation. And once again, I applied our principle of drag here. You can see that the top of the hat lags behind the rest of the hat, and this is true of the trailing edge of the cloak as well. And in the subsequent frames, it catches up with the rest of the body, it settles before the character returns to their idling position. The last animation principle I want to discuss today is squash and stretch. So here I have the simple drumming animation where the character is spinning their stick and striking the drum head. And because the striking of the drum is the focus of the animation, I really want it to be more visually apparent. And we can use squash and stretch to emphasize the impact of the drumstick on the drum head by having it splay out a little bit on the impact. So what I'm going to do is, on the impact of the drum, I'm going to widen it just a little bit. And I'm also going to shorten it to maintain the volume of the drum head. And I'm going to do the same thing on the second drum hit. And already our drumming animation is looking a lot more impactful. We can see the relationship between the drumstick and the drum head as it splays out a little bit for that one frame that it's impacted. Once again, I've added some drag to the animation by having the character's hair lag behind a frame. I've also added some smear frames on the twirling of the drumstick as well as the swinging down of the drumstick. Overall, I think these little changes add to the fluidity of the animation and come together to make it look more visually interesting. I hope this video was helpful. If you have any questions or comments, definitely leave them down below. If you have a piece of art you'd like to share, don't hesitate to drop on by our Discord server. Link is in the description. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you next time.